Hello, my friends. It is not in the nature of a good soul to be easily deceived by the outward appearances of others. We, as students of Stoic philosophy, are taught not to judge hastily, but rather to seek wisdom in understanding. And in that pursuit, we must acknowledge that the signs of a troubled spirit are evident to those who care to look with clear eyes. A bad person, in truth, is not merely someone who causes harm outwardly. Their malady is one that lies within, in the absence of mastery over themselves. The person ruled by passion, by fleeting emotion, is one who has surrendered their mind to forces they cannot control. It is in the swift outburst of anger, the sharpness of jealousy, or the bitterness of resentment that they reveal their inner turmoil. A virtuous person, however, does not bow to such whims. They rise above them, practicing temperance, patience, and control. Remember, it is not the world that stirs us, but our judgment of it. Control over emotions. The Stoic wisdom teaches us that to live a virtuous life, we must first and foremost gain mastery over our own emotions. A bad person, in contrast, is driven by their emotions, allowing these fleeting impulses to guide their actions. Anger, fear, envy, and jealousy. These emotions often dominate their behavior, clouding their judgment and leading them to act recklessly. They may lash out when wronged, seek revenge when slighted, or sink into despair when faced with hardship. These emotional responses, while natural to the human condition, are not the signs of strength or wisdom. They are signs of a mind not in control. The Stoic path, however, teaches us that we must not be ruled by our emotions. We are not merely passive victims of the forces that rise within us. We are capable of recognizing these emotions as they arise, of pausing before we react, and of choosing how we respond. To be moved by our emotions without thought is to be at the mercy of the world, to be a slave to external events. In contrast, a Stoic knows that we have power over how we interpret and respond to these events. We cannot always control the circumstances we face, but we have complete control over how we let them affect us. Consider the example of anger. It is an emotion we all experience, but it is not inherently wrong. The problem arises when anger takes control, leading us to act in ways we later regret. A bad person might allow anger to dictate their responses, seeking to hurt or punish others for the perceived wrongs done to them. But the Stoic reflects, what is the source of this anger? Is it justified? Or is it based on some false belief or misunderstanding? A Stoic does not suppress their emotions, but examines them, seeking to understand their roots and decide whether they align with virtue. In doing so, they avoid being swept away by the tide of irrationality. Fear is another emotion that often governs the actions of those who lack self-control. It can lead them to avoid necessary risks, to retreat from opportunities for growth, or to make decisions based on the avoidance of discomfort. Fear drives them to cling to what is safe and familiar, while the Stoic understands that fear is often irrational. There is little to fear in the natural world, for all things good and bad are part of the great unfolding of nature. The wise person sees fear not as an obstacle to be overcome, but as an opportunity to practice courage and rationality. Fear cannot be eliminated, but it can be mitigated by the understanding that we have the power to face challenges with composure. Envy and jealousy are also signs of a lack of emotional control. A bad person might look at another's success or possessions and feel a deep sense of inadequacy or resentment. Rather than acknowledging their own strengths and embracing their unique path, they seek to tear others down in an effort to elevate themselves. But the Stoic knows that envy is born of comparison, a futile exercise that only brings suffering. Instead, the wise person focuses on their own actions and growth. They understand that the success of another does not diminish their own worth or potential. The control over emotions is not about suppressing them entirely, but about maintaining perspective. Emotions, in their raw form, are a natural part of being human, but it is how we choose to engage with them that determines our character. The Stoic does not deny their emotions, but rather sees them as signals, messengers that provide information about their internal state. A wise person does not react impulsively to these signals, but takes time to reflect, to gain clarity, and to respond in accordance with their highest values. True control over emotions is achieved when we understand that they are not the drivers of our actions, but simply companions along the way. When we choose not to be enslaved by them, when we recognize that we are responsible for our own responses, we gain the freedom to live in harmony with reason, wisdom, and virtue. Virtue is the cornerstone of Stoic philosophy, the highest good, the guiding principle that dictates how we should live. Without virtue, we are lost, adrift in the sea of disorder. A bad person at their core lacks virtue. They may display outward signs of success, power, or even charm, but these are hollow without the substance of virtue. They act out of self-interest, not in pursuit of what is just or wise. They may chase after fleeting pleasures, accumulate wealth, or seek admiration, but these pursuits lack any grounding in moral excellence. The Stoic recognizes that virtue is the only true good. All other external things, wealth, power, fame, are indifferent. They can neither help nor harm us unless we allow them to influence our character. To live without virtue is to live in conflict with one's true nature as a rational being. The Stoic does not prioritize material wealth or status, for they know that these things cannot bring true fulfillment. Instead, the Stoic seeks wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, as these are the only goods that bring lasting contentment. A bad person, however, is enslaved by the pursuit of these external goods. They lack wisdom, the ability to discern right from wrong, to see the world as it truly is. Instead, they are swayed by their immediate desires and the opinions of others. They act rashly, without foresight, chasing after what feels good in the moment rather than what is truly good. A person devoid of wisdom cannot make sound decisions. They may deceive themselves into believing that their actions are justified, all while perpetuating harm to themselves and others. In the absence of virtue, there is also a disregard for justice. Justice, as the Stoics teach, is the act of giving each person their due, treating others with fairness and respect, acknowledging their inherent worth. A bad person is often willing to exploit others, to bend or break the rules in order to gain personal advantage. They may disregard the well-being of those around them, seeing others as mere tools to be used in their pursuit of self-interest. The Stoic, in contrast, lives by the principle that justice is not only about adhering to laws, but also about recognizing the common humanity in all people, acting in ways that promote the well-being of others and honor the interconnectedness of the whole. Without courage, a person is bound by fear. They may shrink from difficult situations, avoid confrontation, or fail to stand up for what is right. A bad person often lacks the courage to do what is morally right because it may come at a cost, whether it be the risk of personal loss, discomfort, or opposition. They may compromise their values for the sake of convenience or personal gain, sacrificing their integrity in the process. Courage, however, is the virtue that allows us to face challenges with strength and conviction, to act in accordance with our principles even when the path is hard or uncertain. Without courage, we become slaves to fear and inaction, unable to stand firm in the face of adversity. Temperance, the final cardinal virtue, is equally absent in the bad person. Temperance is the practice of self-restraint, moderation, and balance. A person without temperance seeks excess in all things, overindulging in food, drink, or pleasure, and constantly chasing after more. They are driven by desire rather than reason, unable to restrain themselves from indulging their base urges. The Stoic, however, practices temperance by mastering their desires and recognizing that true happiness lies not in excess, but in moderation and restraint. A temperate person is not enslaved by their passions, but guides them with reason, ensuring that their actions align with their deeper values and purpose. Thus, when virtue is absent, a person's character is disordered. They live in constant conflict with themselves, driven by impulses and desires that lead them astray. A bad person's life is marked by inconsistency, hypocrisy, and the erosion of their integrity. They may experience momentary pleasures, but they will never find peace or fulfillment, for they live without the grounding force of virtue. The Stoic knows that only by cultivating virtue can we achieve harmony within ourselves, acting in alignment with our rational nature and with the world around us. Without virtue, there is no true happiness, only a fleeting, hollow existence. To live in harmony with nature is one of the central tenets of Stoic philosophy. Nature, in its most expansive sense, is not merely the physical world around us, but also the order, the rationality, and the purpose that govern all things. A bad person, however, is out of sync with this fundamental order. They act in ways that disrupt the natural flow of life, guided by irrational desires and ego-driven impulses, rather than the wisdom that comes from understanding the interconnectedness of all things. They seek to impose their will on the world, rather than accepting the world as it is and understanding their place within it. The Stoic believes that nature operates according to a rational and purposeful design. Everything that exists has a role, a function, and a purpose. The universe is governed by laws that are neither random nor chaotic, but deliberate and harmonious. To live in accordance with nature is to live in accordance with these laws, recognizing that we as individuals are part of a larger whole. We are not separate from the world, but intimately connected to it. Our actions, therefore, must respect the natural order and align with reason, for this is the only way to live a good life. A bad person, however, ignores or disregards this interconnectedness. They place their own desires above the welfare of others, failing to recognize that their actions affect the whole of nature, the whole of society, and the whole of existence. They live with a narrow focus, driven solely by personal gain, ambition, or momentary pleasure, without regard for the broader implications of their actions. They may harm others for their own benefit, destroy the environment for profit, or neglect their responsibilities to the greater good. In doing so, they act as if they are separate from the world around them, ignoring the fact that everything is interdependent. At the heart of this disharmony is the refusal to accept the world as it is. A bad person constantly struggles against what they cannot control, railing against the natural course of events. They resist the inevitable changes of life, whether it be aging, loss, or misfortune, and seek to impose their will upon the world. The Stoic, on the other hand, accepts that there are things beyond our control, and that true peace comes not from fighting against life's challenges, but from accepting them with grace and wisdom. To act against nature is to act in defiance of reality itself, and this leads to internal turmoil and external conflict. Furthermore, a bad person often fails to recognize the role of their fellow human beings in the broader order of nature. They may treat others as tools to be used for their own ends, without considering the inherent dignity and value of each person. In doing so, they disrupt the natural harmony that exists in society, the social contract that binds us all together in mutual respect and cooperation. The Stoic, however, understands that all human beings are part of the same rational order, and that true fulfillment comes not from exploiting others, but from working together for the common good. To live in harmony with nature is to live in harmony with others, recognizing that our well-being is interconnected. A bad person may also disregard the natural world, the environment that sustains us. They may exploit resources, pollute the earth, and disregard the health of the ecosystem, treating nature as something separate from themselves. But the Stoic sees nature as a reflection of the rational order that governs all things. To harm nature is to harm ourselves, for we are deeply connected to the land, the sea, and the sky. The Stoic's life is guided by a sense of reverence for the natural world, recognizing that we have a responsibility to preserve the balance and integrity of the earth for future generations. Finally, disharmony with nature is evident in the bad person's refusal to live by reason. The Stoic believes that reason is the highest faculty of the human being, and that by cultivating our rational nature, we align ourselves with the broader order of the universe. A bad person, however, is often guided by irrational impulses, by the passions and desires that cloud their judgment and steer them away from what is truly good. They may act out of anger, greed, or fear without considering the long-term consequences of their actions. In doing so, they move further away from the rational order of nature, creating chaos both within themselves and in the world around them. To live in harmony with nature is to live with wisdom, acceptance, and a deep understanding of the interconnectedness of all things. It requires us to see ourselves not as isolated beings, but as part of a greater whole, an intricate web of life, society, and the cosmos. When we act in accordance with nature, we align ourselves with reason, justice, and virtue, and we find peace in knowing that we are contributing to the well-being of the world rather than disrupting it. A bad person, in contrast, lives in discord with this natural order, creating disharmony and suffering both within and around them. The desire for power is one of the most dangerous impulses that can overtake a human being. It is the yearning to control others, to dominate circumstances, and to shape the world according to one's own will. A bad person, in the fullest sense, is often driven by this insatiable hunger for power. Power becomes their primary goal, their reason for being. They are willing to manipulate, deceive, and coerce others in order to gain control, all while disregarding the well-being of those around them. In the Stoic worldview, power is a fleeting and ultimately illusory pursuit. True strength, according to Stoic principles, lies not in control over others, but in mastery of oneself. The Stoic seeks to cultivate inner peace, virtue, and wisdom, understanding that external circumstances and the actions of others are beyond their control. A bad person, however, believes that power over others will bring them lasting satisfaction or fulfillment. This desire for control is rooted in insecurity, fear, and a misunderstanding of what it means to live a good life. They cling to the notion that their worth is tied to their dominance over others, that to be powerful is to be superior, and that true happiness is found in the ability to bend the world to their will. However, this desire for power is based on a false belief. That control over the external world can lead to internal peace. It is an illusion that the bad person clings to, unaware that power over others is often built on a foundation of fear, manipulation, and suffering. The one who seeks to dominate others is never free, for they are constantly bound by their need to maintain control. Their sense of self-worth is fragile, dependent on the validation of others, and their peace is fragile, always threatened by the fear of losing their grip on power. The Stoic, on the other hand, understands that power, in the traditional sense, is not the key to happiness or fulfillment. True power is found in the cultivation of virtue and wisdom, in the ability to remain unshaken by the external world, in the capacity to live according to reason and to act justly, regardless of circumstances. The Stoic understands that power over others is transient and ultimately unsatisfying, for it is not aligned with the highest good, the cultivation of virtue and harmony with nature. A bad person who desires power often lacks a sense of inner peace. They may possess wealth, status, or influence, But these external markers of success are no substitute for the contentment that comes from living in alignment with one's values. The person who seeks power over others often has an inner void, an emptiness that they attempt to fill with domination and control. They may exploit others, use their position to manipulate situations to their benefit, or even cause harm to achieve their goals. They see the world as a competition and themselves as players in a game of zero-sum interests. But they fail to see that true fulfillment is not found in the subjugation of others, but in the mastery of the self. Furthermore, the desire for power is often driven by fear, fear of inadequacy, fear of weakness, fear of being overlooked or dismissed. The person who craves power is often trying to fill the void of self-doubt with the external validation that power can bring. They seek control because they believe it will protect them from harm or rejection. But the Stoic teaches that we cannot control others, nor can we control the events of the world. The only true power lies in our ability to control our responses to those events. In this way, the Stoic is free from the need for dominance, for their peace is anchored in their own integrity, not in external circumstances or the approval of others. The pursuit of power can also breed corruption. The bad person, in their quest for control, becomes more willing to abandon their principles in order to gain advantage. They may make compromises, bend their values, and even engage in unethical behavior to achieve their goals. The more power they accumulate, the greater the temptation to exploit others, to deceive and to manipulate. This corruption erodes their character and their ability to live a virtuous life. They may gain power, but they lose their moral compass, becoming increasingly disconnected from the values that define a good life. The Stoic, by contrast, does not seek power but seeks virtue. The Stoic understands that true strength comes from within, from the cultivation of wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. These are the real sources of power, for they are grounded in reason and in harmony with nature. The Stoic does not need to control the world or others, because they have control over their own actions, thoughts, and responses. Their power lies in their ability to remain steadfast in their values, to act justly, to meet challenges with courage, and to live in harmony with nature. In the end, the desire for power is a symptom of a deeper misunderstanding of the nature of true fulfillment. A bad person believes that by controlling others they will find peace. Yet this pursuit only leads to further unrest, for the external world can never bring lasting contentment. The Stoic, however, knows that true power is found not in dominance, but in self-mastery and in living a virtuous life. This is the power that endures, the power that leads to genuine peace, and the power that is not subject to the whims of the world. The lack of reflection and self-awareness is one of the clearest signs of a bad person. Such a person moves through life without ever pausing to examine their actions, their thoughts, or their motives. They act impulsively, driven by immediate desires or external pressures, without considering the consequences or the deeper reasons behind their behavior. This absence of introspection is the root of many moral failings, for without reflection there is no opportunity for growth or self-correction. The Stoic philosophy places great importance on self-awareness. For the Stoic, Understanding oneself is the foundation of all wisdom. Reflection is not merely a passive process, but an active engagement with one's own thoughts and actions. It is through reflection that we come to recognize our mistakes, confront our weaknesses, and understand our true desires. The Stoic believes that by examining our lives regularly, we gain the clarity necessary to align our actions with our highest values. Without this regular self-examination, we risk becoming lost in the noise of external events, allowing our impulses and unchecked emotions to govern our lives. A bad person, however, lacks this ability to step back and reflect on their own nature. They are blind to their own flaws and shortcomings, often justifying their actions without consideration for their impact on others. They may believe that their choices are always the right ones, failing to see that their behavior often stems from ignorance, selfishness, or a lack of understanding. This lack of self-awareness prevents them from recognizing when they have strayed from virtue or when their actions have caused harm. It fosters a mindset of denial and defensiveness, as they are unable or unwilling to admit to mistakes, let alone learn from them. Moreover, a bad person often fails to examine their motives. They may act out of a desire for personal gain, revenge, or vanity, but they do not stop to consider why they are driven by these desires. Reflection reveals the deeper forces that shape our actions, and through self-awareness, we can understand whether our motives align with virtue or if they are driven by base impulses. Without this awareness, a person continues to live in ignorance, never questioning why they pursue the things they do, or whether those pursuits are truly worthwhile. They chase after fleeting pleasures, power, or status, convinced that these will bring them lasting fulfillment, without ever stopping to question the emptiness of such goals. The lack of self-awareness is also evident in how a bad person interacts with others. Without the ability to reflect on their own behavior, they cannot see how their actions affect those around them. They may be selfish, inconsiderate, or manipulative, but because they do not engage in self-reflection, they fail to recognize how others perceive them, or how their actions contribute to conflict and suffering. They lack empathy, not because they are incapable of understanding others, but because they have never taken the time to reflect on their own thoughts, feelings, and actions in a way that would allow them to see the world from another's perspective. In contrast, the Stoic places immense value on reflection, seeing it as a path to self-mastery. Through regular reflection, a Stoic can identify the sources of their inner turmoil, whether it be fear, anger, or envy, and begin to root out these destructive emotions. They examine their daily actions and interactions, striving to ensure that their conduct aligns with virtue. This practice of self-awareness allows the Stoic to continuously refine their character, understanding their strengths and weaknesses, and adjusting their behavior in pursuit of wisdom and moral excellence. It is through this constant process of self-examination that a Stoic remains vigilant in their pursuit of the good, ever mindful of the potential to be swayed by the passions or external circumstances. The lack of reflection also leaves a person vulnerable to external influences. Without a deep understanding of themselves, a bad person is easily swayed by the opinions of others, by the desire for approval, or by the fear of criticism. They may follow trends, adopt ideologies, or act in ways that align with popular opinion without ever considering whether these actions reflect their true values or principles. Their actions are shaped by external pressures rather than by an internal compass of virtue. In this way, they are constantly tossed about by the winds of society and circumstance, never anchored in the steady ground of self. Acknowledge. Reflection, therefore, is not merely an intellectual exercise. It is a transformative practice that shapes the course of one's life. It requires humility, the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about oneself, and the courage to change. The Stoic knows that no one is free from error, and that growth is a continual process. Self-awareness is the tool through which we can discern our weaknesses, cultivate our strengths, and correct our course when we have strayed from the path of virtue. A bad person, by contrast, remains stagnant, blind to their own flaws, and incapable of meaningful self-improvement. Their life is driven by unconscious forces, impulses, desires, and external pressures, and they never take the opportunity to rise above these forces through the power of reflection. In this way, the lack of reflection and self-awareness is not simply a failure of thought, but a failure of character. It keeps a person trapped in ignorance, repeating the same mistakes and perpetuating the same harmful behaviors, unable to break free from the cycle of their own destructive tendencies. The Stoic, by contrast, understands that only through deep reflection and self-awareness can one gain true freedom. Freedom from the tyranny of the passions, freedom from the influence of others, and freedom to live a life in accordance with reason and virtue. In conclusion, a bad person often displays clear signs that mark their disconnection from virtue and reason. Their lack of reflection and self-awareness leads them to act impulsively, driven by desires for power, status, or fleeting pleasures, with little regard for the consequences of their actions. They fail to live in harmony with nature, disrupting the natural order by prioritizing self-interest over the common good. Their desires for control over others stem from insecurity and ignorance, and their lack of virtue, especially wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, keeps them trapped in a cycle of moral failure. The Stoic path, however, offers a way to break free from these destructive tendencies through self-examination, self-mastery, and alignment with nature's rational order. It is only by cultivating virtue, wisdom, and self-awareness that we can rise above these shortcomings and live in true accordance with our higher nature.